Okay, thank you for coming this morning. Unfortunately, we're here for another Tish'a BeAb. Every year we say this is going to be our last, and this year really is going to be our last. Next year, you can all come to me for barbecue in Jerusalem. That's the plan. So for the past 18 months, our whole world has been in a state of mourning. It's not just us today, and it's not just one day. The coronavirus, it claimed so many lives and so many livelihoods. And it seems that every time we open our phones, there's a plea to say an urgent tehillim. And just recently, we learned about the horrific crowd crush in Meron, and the building collapse in Surfside. And there always seems to be a cloud hovering over us. And then the worst are those dreaded Baruch Dayan Emet emails that arrive in our inbox. And then we hold our breath, and we hope that the deceased isn't somebody that we know directly, because if we're not related or affiliated, and we don't need to visit or call the mourners, then we could delete those messages, because those phone numbers, those prayer times, those graveside funerals don't pertain to us. And in a split second, we quickly dismiss unpleasantness. Maybe we have a fleeting twinge of guilt because we didn't pause enough or acknowledge enough the loss of a community member. But then we reason to ourselves and we say we're in survival mode. This past year has brought too much pain upon us. And together with the notion of self-preservation and emotional and compassion fatigue, we just move on. And before we know it, we're focused on the next distraction that pops up on our phone. And I'm sorry to say, but Tish'a BeAb has become for many of us another inconvenience, because how much misery could we take? We have our own issues to deal with. Do we really have to pile on 26 centuries worth of tragedies that befell our nation on this day? I mean, the horrors of the Holocaust alone have taken their toll on all of us collectively. So do we really need to relive the horror every year? And unfortunately, the book of Ezra answers that question with a resounding yes. And what we're here to discuss today is how it's the same attitudes that perpetrated the earliest disasters to befall humanity. It's those same attitudes that still permeate our society today. Hate, entitlement, the thirst for control, the corruption of power. Those are not new things. They've been around since the dawn of time. I'm going to quote Billy Joel: "We didn't start the fire. It was always burning since the world's been turning." It's true. But we may not have started the fire. We didn't put it out either. And one more thing, just a disclaimer: even Megillat Ezra is not going to put out that fire. What Megillat Ezra is going to do, and we're going to revisit some of the passages today, it just continues to cry incessantly for over 154 verses about the status quo. It doesn't offer solutions, and worse, as we're reading it, we don't see a way out. And so when it comes to rising from the ashes, we're on our own. And maybe, thanks to my mom, maybe a gardening tool could help us. There's a gardening tip that I recently discovered that ashes from wood, they contain potassium and lime and trace elements that when used sparingly can nourish plants. And so maybe the secret to rebuilding actually lies in the ashes themselves. So today we're going to turn to our prophet of doom, Tish'a BeAb. He was the prophet at that time. He witnessed the aftermath of the destruction, and he authored the book of Ezra. There's something there that's meant for us to read right here, right now, that God willing will nourish us and take us to the next phase, and hopefully will promote growth. And so let's give this a shot. Thanks, Emily. So speaking of Megillat Ezra, let me just get the same thing so I can face you. Let's first talk about where the Megillah is placed in the canon. The canon is the English word for the Tanakh. The Tanakh is composed of 24 books, and Megillat Ezra falls in the middle of the Megillot that are in the last portion of the Tanakh, the Ketubim portion. We have Shir HaShirim, which is the Song of Songs. We have the Book of Ruth. We have our Ezra, which is Lamentations. We have Kohelet, and then we have Megillat Esther. And one of the interesting things is that not only is Megillat Ezra nestled right in the middle, its tone is a song, is a dirge. It sounds like a funeral hymn that is taking place. It's a very mournful, it's called Lamentations. It's a very mournful way that we read the book. But one of the interesting things, next slide please, that even though the prophet, imagine, Yirmiyahu, is walking among the ashes and surveying the destruction, and he has the wherewithal to compose a sefer. Next slide, please. Where all of the verses are written in acrostic style. He has the time to order and to organize his thoughts, maybe his ideas, or maybe he's just taking these words, these external expressions of himself, and he's putting them down in a very neat, orderly way. If you see the screen behind me, you'll see the Aleph, the Bet, the Gimel, the Dalet, every letter of the Hebrew alphabet, beautifully and methodically laid out for us. Now we see this and we say, oh, that's nice and that's clever, but really we should get a chill up our spines when we see something like this. We should say something is off here. To be so neat and so organized at a time of destruction and devastation is not so normal. It reminds me of a scene in a movie where the army officials come to a military wife to tell her that her husband's been killed in combat. She comes to the door, she hears the news, and then she seems to just ignore them, sits back down on the couch, continues to fold the laundry, continues to sort the socks, as if nothing ever happened. And psychologically, if we were to see the scene, we would say the woman was crazy. But actually, what she is doing is she's employing a coping mechanism. When everything in her world is falling down around her, when her world has just been crashed, she needs to control something. And so whether it's sorting the rubber bands and the paper clips in your drawer, or whether it's sorting the laundry, we as humans feel we need to control something so that we don't fall apart completely and we are able to have a handle on something. This is something that the prophet could control. The alphabet. He could control that. He could control the letters, and he could tell them exactly where they should place themselves. And by this kind of organization, we create some kind of sense of order. Next slide, please. So just to give you a quick summary, it's not just the first chapter. The book of Eicha is 5 poems, 5 chapters, and it seems to have a very neat, organized display. The first chapter is 22 verses because there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The second chapter, the same thing. The third chapter you'll see has 66 verses because it has AAA, BBB, CCC, and it goes in that order. That's how we have 66. The fourth chapter is also beautifully and acrostically written. We're going to see there are a couple of variations that we're going to discuss soon. And then the fifth chapter comes. And we feel like somebody else took the pen and somebody else decided to author this sefer, because nothing is in its proper order. The letters are jumbled. They're not even all 22 letters represented. Some are represented twice, some are not represented at all. And we're not sure what to do about that. And so we move into this sefer. We want to be prepared. I'll take the next slide, please. We want to be prepared as to what is ahead of us. Because sometimes if we brace ourselves, if we're prepared for something, we're able to handle it a little better. So for us today, the summary, the basic content, you have it up before you. In the first chapter, the city is a desolate, weeping widow. In the second chapter, we learn from the author that the miseries result from national sins and acts of God. In the third chapter, there's crying. There's so much crying. The whole book is so uncomfortable to read. It's passage after passage of crying, of mourning, of hopelessness. The fourth chapter laments the ruin. I think this is the saddest part, and I think this is the saddest chapter, because it traces it to the people's sins. And the fifth chapter has a couple of words that seem prayer-oriented, so that we could hopefully move past these tragedies. And so amid all of this sadness and grief, we have to ask ourselves, what's the purpose of reading Eicha? Judaism is faith-based and goal-oriented. We don't just cry for the sake of crying. We don't just sob and mourn and have anguish. It has to serve a purpose. And today, we are intended to all mirror the actions of the mourner. We're not wearing leather shoes, we don't eat, we don't greet people the way we normally would. And thanks to the SCA for gathering us all here together, we get to wear 2 hats. We get to be the mourner, and we also get to be the menachem, the comforter. And that serves a purpose. People coming together to build off each other, to share their pain. I'm going to share with you, my daughter-in-law Simone is a psychologist, so I always turn to her for this element. If we could have the next slide, please. There was a grief cycle that's depicted up here. It's authored by a woman. It's called the Kubler-Ross grief cycle. And it shows us the secular approaches to the stages of grief. And it seems like denial, you'll see it right there, is the first stage of grief. And it is a coping mechanism. We deny, like that woman who went on folding her laundry, we temporarily deny the reality because it's too much for us to process. And on the chart there, you'll see there's avoidance, there's confusion, there are a lot of emotions that come along with that first denial. Eicha does the same exact thing. Eicha starts at Sefer saying, Eicha Tish'a BeAb. How is it possible? Or rather, it is impossible. It can't be. Since it's not possible, then it isn't. And we try to deny the idea, like Eicha Tish'a BeAb, the word badad, we just recently revisited with Balak and Bilam, where the soothsayer, where the Bilam, I can't think of the word for him right now, that he was a prophet, where he says, Hen am levadad yishkon. He uses the same word, and there that word is meant to say that we are a nation that is up and aside and beyond all other nations. And now that same term is being used to describe us as being alone and desolate and devastated. And there are words, actually we can go to the next slide so you can see it for yourself. And the next one yet. Yes. Thank you. And when we see phrases like En la Menachem, we start to understand who is a Menachem. This city of Jerusalem, it has nobody to comfort her, like Naomi wanted to get somebody to comfort Ruth. She's literally a widow. She's lost everything. And we see words like Lo matzah manoach in the third verse. You know who else couldn't find a resting place? The dove, Noach's dove. So here we are, we're first opening the book, and we need to view ourselves and get into the mindset that the Jewish people today, not just when this was written, is like a dove that can't find footing. We are flapping around, and there's nowhere for us to find complete comfort. Baruch Hashem, we have the state of Israel, and even that, we know from the rockets we just experienced a few weeks, months ago, there is no rest for the weary. And there are words that are used like we are ben Mitzarim, we're like the Jews that left Mitzrayim. We are wandering. We are not yet where we need to be. And this is the problem. If we stay stuck in this stage of grief, if we stay stuck in a state of denial, denial, just so that I could define it in terms of the Megillah, denial is when we take actual reality and we replace it with preferred reality. And that disconnects us from the truth. And today, with social media and the internet, what's reinforced for us is what we usually believe. What's reinforced for us, we only tune into the channels that tell us what we want to hear, that are like-minded, that agree with us. And when we only read our own narratives, what happens? It's actually a form of denial. I really don't want to know what's going on. I know in my house the newspaper comes and it's very hard to open up. I'm not sure I want to see what's on that front page anymore. I sort of want to deny the news. I want to deny so many things. I hate to use these words, but we're all very familiar with the phenomenon. It's called cancel culture. The disease that corrupted our society. It's a situation where if reality makes us uncomfortable or makes somebody uncomfortable, all they have to do is erase any evidence that it ever existed, and just like that, it doesn't exist. Cancelers, they get to play judge and jury. If they identify something that they deem to be a transgression, and this is not like ghosting. Ghosting is a more private form of rejection. It's more passive. But canceling is intended to be something public and intended to harm and to shame. And I'm only bringing this up because it's part of the grief process. The stage of denial can quickly turn into anger when people wake up and they realize that their preferred reality isn't realistic. That's where thoughts come in like, it's not fair, why me? And unfortunately, the next stage from this anger is blaming others for their grief. And in chapter 2, if we could get the next slide, please. In chapter 2, we see just this. Now, this is so poetically perfect. If we just took the time to notice the aberration. I put it in big and in bold. Verses 16 and verse 17. They don't follow the pattern. They're not in alphabetical order. The ayin and the peh are inverted. And the Megillah is screaming at us. It's shouting a message to us. And it's telling us the ayin, incidentally, is the what? The eye of perception. The peh is what? Is the mouth. And what is it doing? It's saying what we see, actual reality, what we're seeing, what are we doing about it? If we look at verse 16, it says, all your enemies open their mouths wide against you. They scoff and gnash their teeth and say, we have swallowed her up. This is the day we've all been waiting for. And how lucky are we that we've lived to see this day where the Jewish people find their doom and destruction. What just happened in this verse? Why does that come before the next verse? Which is, if you think about it, we should have read it in the reverse. It should have been the ayin and then the peh. We should have first said, the Lord has done what he planned. He fulfilled his word that he decreed long ago. He overthrew us, no pity. The enemy gets to gloat over us, and the enemies are on top and we're on the bottom. That's really what our eye should see first. Our eye should see the reality. The reality is that we're in the dumps. But what do we do? What do we do in the book of Ezra? Why is it such a depressing book that nobody ever wants to talk about it? I don't even want to stand here talking to you about it, but it is Tish'a BeAb, and so we need to actually look at this actual reality. And the actual reality is very sad. And we mix up the order because what we want to do is we want to blame other people for our situation. We want to say that it's because of our enemies that God punished us. We don't want to say that God punished us, allowing for our enemies to rule over us. That one little flip, that flip between the eye and the mouth, between the ayin and the peh, between the perspective of how we see our reality, that is what keeps us still mucked in the depths of all this. If I could have the next screen, please. This is something that's going to permeate throughout the book of Ezra. It's not a one-time story. The next one, chapter 3, has also, I put it in bold for you to see, Patsu alenu pihem kol oivenu. Who are we speaking about here again? Others. What are we speaking about? The way they behave towards us, how they open their mouths towards us, and how they do all these horrible things towards us. And the next verse, the ayin, the one that represents the eyes, what does that say about that? It says, I can't stop crying. I'm blaming my enemies for my grief, my source of grief. Eini, my eyes don't tire of crying. Why? Because my enemies are torturing me. What's wrong with this picture? The prophet is telling us there's something wrong with this picture, but the only way he could tell it to us is by warping the alphabet, by saying you have it all wrong. Your perception, your understanding of how the world works and how God works is completely off. And what you need to do is recognize what comes first, your actions or the enemy's reactions. And I'll take the next slide, please, because I want to get out of this sifit as soon as humanly possible. It's really one big pity party. Again, I'm so happy, thank you, Sonia, for asking that question, which is, does it ever say what we did wrong? And I'm glad you asked that question, because the whole point of the Megillah is to show us what happens when we take the blame and put it on other people. And I will address that further in just a bit. So in this next slide, in chapter 4, and I promise you I'm taking you through this as quickly as I can, because it's even more painful if you sit and read every single verse. But this chapter does the same thing. I bolded it for us. It has the peh before the ayin. What does the peh of the people say? What is the mouth doing? What is it saying? It's saying Hashem no longer regards us. And what is the ayin saying? Because when we look to other people for relief, Hashem ignores us. As long as we keep looking outside of ourselves for the solution is going to elude us. And now we can go to chapter 5. Next slide, please. I put it all here in the English because the Hebrew was not going to serve any type of acrostic purpose. But I put it here also because chapter 5 is just one big jumble. It's just one big, you can see it in the next slide, please. It's just one big mess. And it proves something very important to us. This is part of our grief healing. It proves that the order in the first 4 chapters and the chaos in the last chapter are all part of one entity. There is no such thing as order without grief, and there should be no such thing as grief without order. I'll use different words. Chaos and poetry, those two, the chaotic display of the 5th chapter, together with the poetry of the previous 4 chapters, you know what they are? They're actually 2 sides of the same coin. And if you see verse 21, I don't know if you'll like it or not, it says, Hashiveni Hashem elecha v'nashuva. It sounds like a song, Hashiveni v'nashuva. Not allowed to sing today, but it sounds like a beautiful song. God, bring us back, and we will return to you. And the prophet is saying, that's the problem. The problem is that you're waiting for God to bring you back so that you could return. And that's not going to be what's going to save the day. The last verse says, God, you have despised us. You have taken out your fury on us exceedingly. And to answer your question, the Megillah does not offer a solution for us. And there's a little news flash if you wanted to read the Megillah and be aware of this. Throughout the whole Megillah, God doesn't say not a single word. Where else does God not say a single word? I gave you, thank you, I gave you those Megillot that were part of this canon because I wanted you to recognize that this comes from the same stock as Megillat Esther, where there also God's name doesn't even appear. Because the plan in Megillat Esther and the way we're going to find salvation there is going to be a light for how we're going to find salvation here. The salvation that we need to find is going to have to come from us. It's not going to come from our enemies. We can't blame other people. That's going to get us nowhere. It got us nowhere. For 5 chapters, all we did was cry and nag and scream and lament. And where did it get us? We were at the end of chapter 5 and we're nowhere. We got nowhere. And so the Megillah, without spelling it out for us, is telling us, maybe look at the book of Esther. Maybe look at our history, the hardships that we've endured as a nation. Those should serve to help us. Those should help us understand that we've gotten this far, and we have. And if you Google the survival of the Jewish people and what the percentage of our survival rate was, that it's impossible that we're still even standing today, which is a miracle in and of itself. And so last week, the SAFE Foundation invited an author, Jessica Leahy, to speak to our community about raising independent children. And she wrote a book, and just the title alone is mind-blowing. My mom lives on this, but this is how we were raised. She calls it The Gift of Failure. And she highlights the importance of allowing children to find solutions, even if the immediate result is failure, because she says that persevering despite setbacks creates resilience. And that's what we want to create. We want to create a nation of resilience, because resilience is what's going to help us through this marathon, this grief marathon, and it's going to get us to the place of acceptance. And I know I quoted Billy Joel once, but I'm going to do it one more time. We too have seen the lights go out on Broadway. And during last summer's riots, the flames were everywhere, but no one really cared. And the song was written in 1976 during racial tensions. And this song could even describe, of course, current events, the Holocaust, events in history where humanity failed to step up. One verse that he writes, "There are not many who remember. They say a handful still survives to tell the world about the way the lights went out and keep the memory alive." Acceptance means choosing to come to terms with our new reality, readjusting, evolving, not only to survive, but to thrive. I'll take the next slide, please. And in every experience, we can find order in the chaos. It's up to us to decide which side of the coin we want to see. I put up here a double-edged sword. The mountain of Sinai is called Har Sinai, which we could think of as the mountain of the chuppah, of the wedding, of the union between God and man, of the greatest show on earth. That was Har Sinai. But it's also called Har Chorev, the mountain of the sword. The mountain of the sword? Who would ever call Har Sinai Har Chorev? And I think there's a lot to be learned from the Hebrew language. I'll give you one more example and then I'll take us, well actually, I'll take the next slide please. Since we were talking about the sword, sometimes in the chaos, in the chaotic moments, in the lightning, in the thunder that was evident on Har Sinai, it's hard for us to see the peace and it's hard for us to see the poetry. But Har Sinai is Har Chorev. The chuppah and the sword are one and the same. And I put up here this slide because if we only understood what Moshe was saying when he referred to the mountain as the mountain of the sword, what he was really referring to is that in the Garden of Eden, God placed a sword to block our entrance. And Har Chorev, the mountain of the sword, was the very opportunity for us to return to an idyllic existence. And so that's part of our job today, is in the chaos to see the calm. And part of the word itself of where we are, our condition is we are in Galut. And the word Galut itself means to be displaced. But if, now I'll take the next slide please, and it's the final slide. If we choose to see ourselves in Galut as being displaced, we're going to miss a very key component of Galut. Do you know what Galut also means? Legalot, to reveal. Galut is not only the place where we are displaced, it's the place where God reveals himself for us. And in order for that to happen, for God to reveal himself to us, we have to turn to the power of the pause. We have to press the pause button. I don't know if this last year was a forced pause. A lot of us had to pause from our daily routines, and a lot of us had to take a very big pause. And I don't have the answers, but I'm convinced that it's not in the big hullabaloo. It's not in the thunder. It's not in the lightning. It's not in all of those big violence and the riots and all the noise that we make. That's not the solution. The solution, I believe, is in Melachim Aleph, where the prophet asks to see God and to experience God. And God says clearly, he sends a wind, and God says, I am not in the wind. AKA, I am not in the chaos. I am not in the thunder. I am not in the fire. You know where I am? I'm in that pause. I'm in that place where if we could stop for 1 second, I'll give you an example. There is a pause in music, for instance. A trumpet player could catch his breath during this pause. And during a pause in dance, a dancer could connect and regroup. And in Gan Eden and in Sinai, what did we do? We created chaos in the order. And now it's time for us to create understanding in the confusion, to create peace in the turmoil, to find silence in the pandemonium. It's our turn to organize the tohu vavohu, the chaos that our world is in, and it's our turn to create a world that invites God back into our midst. So I hope and I pray that we're able to take this time, to take the pause, to take a deep breath, to see the chaos, to see the ashes as a way, as a means, as a tool to rebuild a beautiful future. Amen.